My husband is my brother's ex-wife's ex-boyfriend, and when my family found out, they tried to destroy my marriage. My mother called me selfish while I was holding a laundry basket full of towels that weren't even mine, and that pretty much explains my childhood better than any family photo ever could. I know that sounds dramatic. I swear I'm not trying to be cute about it. It was just always something like that. I'd be folding clothes, cleaning a mess I didn't make, calming down a fight I didn't start, or handing over something I earned, and somehow I'd still be the selfish one. Meanwhile, my little brother could breathe wrong and my mother would act like he'd just survived a war. He was the youngest, the only boy, the miracle baby, the poor thing, the he's just sensitive, the you know how he gets. My sisters and I used to joke that if he burned the house down, my mother would ask who left the matches where he could find them. Except it wasn't really a joke, because that woman could take any disaster and twist it until one of us girls was standing there apologizing while he pouted on the couch like a prince in sweatpants. I was the oldest, so naturally I got promoted to unpaid assistant parent before I even understood what a checking account was. My middle sister was technically only a little younger than me, but she learned faster than I did how to disappear. My youngest sister got good at staying quiet. I got good at being useful. Useful is a dangerous thing to be in a family like mine, because once people realize you'll carry the heavy end of everything, they stop asking if your arms hurt. When my brother was little, he got new things. Not fancy mansion kid things. Okay? We weren't rich, but new. New sneakers when school started. New backpack. New game system from a discount store after my dad picked up extra weekend shifts. New jacket because boys grow so fast. My sisters and I got hand-me-downs, clearance rack clothes, and lectures about being grateful. If one of us touched his stuff, my mother snapped like we'd committed a felony. If he broke something of ours, she said we should have put it away better. If he had a tantrum before school, I was late because I had to calm him down. If he got in trouble for talking back to a teacher, my mother asked why I hadn't helped him with his attitude at home. If he shoved my youngest sister and she cried, my mother said she was provoking him with her whining. If I argued, she would look at me with that tired, disappointed face and say, "You're the oldest. You're supposed to know better." By the time I was in high school, I had this little allowance from babysitting neighborhood kids and doing chores for an elderly neighbor down the street. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Or I thought it was mine. My mother started making comments about how my brother needed money for snacks, how he felt left out, how he shouldn't have to watch his sisters have cash when he didn't. Mind you, he did absolutely nothing to earn it. He considered taking out the trash an act of physical oppression. But somehow a piece of my money started becoming family money, which meant his money. At first I gave it because I was trained to. Then I gave it because refusing caused more drama than handing over a few dollars. Then one day I watched him take money I'd earned wiping sticky fingerprints off an old woman's dining table, walk to the corner store, buy himself junk food, and not even offer my youngest sister a piece when she asked. He said, "Get your own." My high school graduation should have been my first real memory that belonged to me. I had worked so hard to get there. I wasn't valedictorian or anything shiny like that. But I had survived that house with decent grades, part-time work, and a smile I could put on fast enough that teachers thought I was mature. Mature is another word adults use when they don't want to notice a kid is exhausted. My parents didn't come. My brother didn't want to sit through a long ceremony. He said it would be boring. My mother didn't want to leave him home because he'd been in a mood. And my father didn't want to argue with her, because arguing with her required a spine he only rented out for work emergencies. So my sisters came. My middle sister took photos on her phone. My youngest sister brought me gas station flowers and cried harder than I did. I told everyone it was fine. I smiled in every picture. That night, my middle sister sat on the edge of the bathtub while I cried on the floor like a very dignified graduate. She said, "You need your own account." I said, "I have one." She said, "No, one they don't know about." That was the first real rescue anybody ever offered me. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just my sister helping me open a bank account my parents couldn't touch and teaching me to hide the debit card somewhere smarter than my underwear drawer. I know. I wasn't exactly a criminal genius. After that, I started saving like a woman preparing to fake her own death. Except the death was just leaving my childhood bedroom. I took extra shifts. I stopped telling my mother what I made. I lied badly at first, then better. I sold a few things I didn't need. I applied for community college in another city and found a room in a shared apartment above a laundromat that smelled like detergent and fried onions from the place next door. When I told my parents I was leaving, my mother acted wounded, not surprised. That was important. She knew I'd leave eventually. She just thought she could make me feel guilty enough to drag my suitcase back inside. "You're abandoning your family. she said. I looked at my brother, who was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal straight from the box like a raccoon with legal rights. I said, "No, I'm retiring." My father told me to be respectful. My mother cried. My brother said I'd be back in 3 months because I didn't know how the real world worked. He said it with his mouth full because of course he did. I hugged my sisters on the porch. My youngest sister wouldn't let go, and I almost broke right there. My middle sister whispered, "Keep going." So I did. I worked as an office assistant at a small insurance office, which sounds boring because it was, but boring felt like a vacation. I filed forms, answered phones, dealt with people angry about bills, and ate lunch in my car when the break room got too loud. I took night classes because I had this stubborn little dream of getting a stable job with benefits and a desk that didn't wobble. Nothing glamorous. I didn't want to conquer the world. I wanted rent paid on time and food that nobody guilted me for eating. For a few years, I barely spoke to my parents. My sisters kept in touch. They came to visit when they could. My brother sent random messages sometimes, usually when he wanted something or when my mother had clearly told him to reach out. They were always weirdly casual, like, "Hey, hope you're not still mad," which is such a beautiful way to apologize for absolutely nothing. Then my middle sister had a baby. That baby changed her. Not in a bad way. She just started looking at family differently. Softer at first, then more complicated. She wanted her son to know everybody. She wanted birthday parties with cousins and grandparents. She wanted what we didn't have, or maybe what she wished we'd had. I understood it, even when it made me nervous. She called me one night while I was eating cold noodles over the sink because I didn't want to wash a bowl. She said, "I need to ask you something, and you can say no." She asked if I'd consider visiting our parents with her. Just once. She said they'd been different. She said they'd talked about therapy. Not that she'd seen them go, obviously. Just that they said it. Please clap for the bare minimum. She said our mother cried when talking about regrets. She said our father had been quieter, sadder. I wanted to say no so fast my phone cracked. Instead, I sat there with my noodles getting sadder by the second and asked, "Why?" "Because I don't want my son growing up with all these missing pieces," she said. That hit me somewhere annoying. Because I loved my nephew. I loved him in this wild, protective way that scared me a little. I didn't want him around the old version of our family, but I also didn't want to be the aunt who carried so much anger that every room had to rearrange itself around her. So I said I'd come for one weekend. Going back to my hometown felt like walking into a room where someone had moved one chair and pretended the whole house was renovated. The streets were the same. The grocery store had a new sign, but the same weird smell near the produce section. My parents' house looked smaller, which made me mad because part of me wanted it to look as big and ugly as it felt in my memories. My mother hugged me too tightly and said, "My girl." My father looked older. He hugged me awkwardly, patted my back twice, and asked about work. My brother wasn't there at first, which helped. The first dinner was almost normal. My mother asked questions and only interrupted half the answers. My father talked about fixing the back fence. My sisters kept making eye contact with me like we were all wildlife researchers observing a dangerous animal from a safe blind. Then my brother came over the next day, and within 10 minutes he asked if I still had that little office job. I said, "Yes, the little office job that pays my rent." He smirked. Touchy. That summer, one of my friends from work invited me to a backyard cookout. I almost didn't go because I'd been driving back and forth to my hometown more often and I was tired of people. But she promised there would be grilled food, folding chairs, and no forced team-building activities. So I went. That's where I met the man who would become my husband. I'm not giving him a name because, honestly, this story already has enough people in it, and he's always been the calm part anyway. He was a maintenance technician, the kind of person who could fix a sink, explain what was wrong without making you feel stupid, and notice when your drink was empty without announcing he was one of the good ones. He wasn't flashy. He didn't have that fake charming thing some men do where you can almost hear them congratulating themselves for listening. He just listened. We talked beside a cooler for so long that the ice melted around the cans. He asked about my job. I asked about his. He told me he liked work that made sense. Broken thing, find problem, fix problem. I laughed and said my family would make him quit that philosophy in a week. We started seeing each other. Coffee at a little place near my apartment. Walks after work. Grocery trips that accidentally became dates because we both hated wasting time. He saw my anxiety in little ways before I admitted it. Like when I apologized because traffic made me 6 minutes late, and he said, "You don't have to perform remorse. Just come sit down." I made fun of him for sounding like a therapist, but I kept thinking about it. I didn't tell my family about him for months, not because I was ashamed, because I wanted something that belonged to me before they got their hands on it. My mother had a way of turning every happy thing into a family meeting, and my brother had a way of sniffing out joy like it personally offended him. By the end of the year, things with him were serious enough that hiding him felt childish. And because I was apparently still addicted to giving my family opportunities to disappoint me, I decided to bring him to dinner at my parents' house. The dinner started fine. My mother fussed over the table like she was auditioning for a normal family. My father asked my boyfriend about work and nodded like he understood electrical systems. My sisters were there, both giving me little encouraging smiles. My brother arrived late because why respect time when people will wait for you? He walked into the dining room, saw my boyfriend, and froze. At first, I thought maybe they knew each other from work. My stomach did that drop thing anyway, because my body recognized danger before my brain had the paperwork ready. My brother pointed at him and said, "Are you serious?" The room went quiet. My mother looked between them like she was about to catch a falling vase. My boyfriend's face changed. Not guilty exactly, but surprised in a way that told me yes, there was history. I said, "What?" My brother laughed, sharp and ugly. "You brought him here?" My boyfriend said my brother's name softly, like he was trying not to make the situation worse. Wrong choice. My brother exploded. He said I needed to end it. Right there, at the table. He said I disrespected him on purpose, that I knew what I was doing, that I'd always wanted to take things from him. I was so confused I actually looked around like maybe there was another woman in the room named Maribel who had been plotting something in her spare time. My mother immediately said, "Everyone calm down." After 10 minutes of shouting, I finally understood the accusation. My boyfriend had briefly dated my brother's ex about a year earlier. Briefly, before I knew him, before he knew me, before I'd even started visiting home again regularly. My brother said it like I'd dug through his past, selected a man from his emotional junk drawer, and brought him home as a personal attack. I wish I could say I handled it beautifully. I did not. I said, "Do you hear yourself?" He said, "Do you hear yourself? You're sitting next to a guy who went after my ex." My boyfriend said, "She and I dated for a few weeks after you two had broken up." My brother slammed his hand on the table. My nephew started crying in the other room. My middle sister went to get him. My youngest sister muttered, "Here we go," under her breath, which would have been funny if I hadn't been dying inside. My mother looked at me, not him, and said, "Maybe you should have told us." I said, "Told you what?" I didn't know. She said, "Well, now you do." That was when I felt it. That old childhood shift. The facts didn't matter. The timeline didn't matter. His feelings had entered the room, so reality needed to kneel. In the car, he told me everything. He didn't hide. He didn't get defensive. He said he dated the woman briefly after she ended things with my brother. She was nice, but guarded. She told him my brother had been controlling, jealous, always checking where she was, always turning small things into proof she didn't care enough. She ended the brief thing with my boyfriend too because she wasn't ready to date anyone seriously. He hadn't spoken to her since. I sat there listening with my arms crossed so tightly my shoulders hurt. He said, "I'm sorry I didn't mention it. I didn't realize the connection until tonight." I believed him. That was the worst part for my nervous system. There was no secret affair, no betrayal, no dramatic twist that made it simple. Just a stupid, awkward overlap in a small enough community where people's histories sometimes bump into each other like carts in a grocery aisle. Eventually, I decided I wasn't breaking up with him because my brother couldn't accept an ex had left him. That sounds obvious now, but at the time it felt like I was defying gravity. I told my mother my decision over the phone. She sighed for so long I checked if the call dropped. She said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I said, "No, he is." She said, "He's hurt." I said, "So was I," repeatedly, for years. "You survived ignoring that." She got quiet. For a few months, my brother kept his distance. He didn't apologize, but he stopped actively foaming at the mouth, so everyone treated that like peace. My boyfriend and I kept building our life. He met my sisters properly. My nephew adored him because he could fix toys and make pancakes shaped like lumpy animals. My youngest sister told me, "He's too calm. Is he hiding a second family?" We got engaged the following spring. He proposed at a small dinner with both our families and a few friends. Nothing huge. Just a rented room behind a local restaurant, some flowers, a playlist my youngest sister made, and my middle sister crying before anything even happened because she has the emotional restraint of a sponge. I knew something was up because my boyfriend wore a button-down shirt without me threatening him. Also, his sister kept filming random things like my water glass. But when he actually got down on one knee, I still froze. Not in a bad way. In a, oh, this is happening to me and nobody is taking it away yet way. He said sweet things. Not poetic, thank God. He knows me. He said I made ordinary days feel worth repeating. He said he wanted to be on my team for the annoying stuff too, not just the happy stuff. I cried before he finished. I said yes so fast my youngest sister yelled, "Let him ask." Then my brother stood up. I saw it before he spoke. That tight jaw, that red face, that look he got when the room wasn't centered on him and he couldn't tolerate it. He said, "Unbelievable." My mother whispered his name like she was begging him, but not stopping him, never stopping him. He pointed at me and said, "You always find a way to take what isn't yours." There it was, in front of friends, in front of my future in-laws, in front of the man who had just proposed to me. My brother turned my engagement into a rerun of his rejection. I said, "Say one more word and you're leaving." He laughed. "Of course, make me the bad guy." My youngest sister said, "You're doing that yourself." He started yelling about the ex again, about betrayal, about how nobody cared what this did to him. His voice cracked on that last part, and for 1 second I saw something real under the performance. He was humiliated. Not because I'd hurt him, but because the story he told himself, the one where he was wronged and everyone owed him repair, was losing power in public. My middle sister got between us. My boyfriend stepped back, not because he was scared, but because he refused to make it a man fight. His father asked my brother to leave. My mother started crying because apparently the soundtrack of every family disaster needed her soprano grief. My brother left after calling me cruel. My mother followed him into the parking lot. My father stayed inside, staring at his plate like it had just asked him for child support. I still accepted the proposal. Obviously. The ring was already on my finger, and I wasn't handing my brother another memory to ruin completely. But the room felt different after. People were kind. Too kind. That gentle voice people use around someone whose family just embarrassed them publicly. I hated it. I wanted to crawl out of my skin and come back as someone with normal relatives. Later in bed, I stared at the ceiling and said, "Maybe we should elope." My fiancé turned toward me. "Is that what you want?" I said, "I want a wedding where nobody screams about an ex-girlfriend during dessert." He said, "Low bar." After the engagement dinner, my brother went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, suspicious quiet, but the family treated it like maturity. My mother said he was processing. My father said time would cool things down. My sisters said to stay alert. But even they hoped maybe shame had finally done what parenting never did. Then my brother invited us to dinner at his apartment. I stared at the message for so long my screen dimmed. He said he wanted to clear the air before the wedding. He said he didn't want bad blood. He said family mattered. All the right words, arranged like flowers over a trapdoor. My fiancé said, "We don't have to go." I said, "I know." Then we went. The dinner was weirdly normal at first. My brother made pasta, which shocked everyone because I didn't know he knew water could boil without a woman supervising. My mother praised him like he'd personally harvested wheat. My father brought cheap wine. My sisters came because they didn't trust the situation either, and my youngest sister texted me from across the table, "If this becomes a cult meeting, blink twice." We ate. We talked about work, gas prices, my nephew's preschool drama, and wedding colors. My brother was polite. Too polite. He asked my fiancé about his job. He even smiled. My stomach stayed tight anyway, because I've seen enough horror in normal kitchens to know calm doesn't always mean safety. It can mean someone is waiting for the right moment. After dessert, he stood up and said, "I need everyone to hear something." My fiancé's hand touched my knee under the table. Just a quick pressure. Like, here we go. My brother connected his phone to the television. Photos appeared. Him and his ex. My fiancé and his ex. Cropped messages. Old posts from a social media app. Screenshots with dates hidden, names partly blurred, little pieces arranged to tell a story that wasn't true. He had made a presentation. He said my fiancé had used me to stay close to the woman. He said I'd been desperate to feel chosen. He said I took leftovers because I'd always wanted to beat him at something. He said my engagement was built on his humiliation. I remember looking at the screen and thinking, this is so stupid it almost looks fake. But it wasn't fake. It was my family sitting in cheap dining chairs while my brother emotionally vomited onto a television. My fiancé went pale. Not angry first. Humiliated. That hurt me more than the yelling. He was a private person, and there he was, being dissected in front of people who barely knew how to spell boundaries. I said, "Turn it off." My brother kept talking. I said louder, "Turn it off." My mother grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Let him finish. He's been holding this in." I looked at her hand on me, then at the screen, then at my fiancé's face. Something in me snapped clean. I stood up, walked over, took the remote from my brother's hand, and shut the television off. He tried to grab it back. I pushed him away from me. My mother screamed. "Maribel," I said, "don't you dare act shocked now." My brother's face changed. He looked almost pleased, like he'd been waiting for proof I was the unstable one. He said, "See? That one word made me want to break every plate in that apartment." My fiancé got up and said, "We're leaving." In the hallway, my brother yelled that I'd regret choosing him. I turned around and said, "I regret coming here." Then we left. In the car, nobody spoke for a while. My fiancé drove because my hands were shaking too much. Finally, he said, "I'm sorry." I stared at him. For what? For being part of this. And that made me angry in a whole new direction. Not at him, at them. Because they had taken a man who had done nothing except love me patiently and made him feel like a problem I needed to solve. I said, "You're not part of this. You're just the latest excuse." A few days later, I asked my brother to come to my place and talk. I wanted my fiancé there. Not as backup exactly, but because I was tired of family conversations happening around him like he was furniture. My brother came with my mother, which I had not invited. She walked in holding a container of cookies like baked goods were diplomatic immunity. I said, "I asked for him." She said, "I'm his mother." My fiancé stayed in the living room with me. My brother sat across from us, arms crossed, looking like a teenager forced into a guidance counselor's office. I took a breath and apologized for pushing him. I said it wasn't okay for me to put my hands on him, even though what he did was cruel and humiliating. I meant that. I can own my part without pretending his part was small. He shrugged. "I knew you'd react like that." My mother said, "He was scared to tell the truth." I said, "That wasn't truth. That was a scrapbook of obsession." My brother's jaw tightened. He said he'd been trying to protect me. He said my fiancé wasn't trustworthy. He said I was too sensitive and lonely to see it. He said everyone was afraid to tell me because I'd make myself the victim. My fiancé spoke calmly. The relationship was short. It ended before I met Maribel. I haven't contacted her since. Your screenshots don't show what you're saying they show. He said, "I'm sorry you're upset." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "That is not an apology." He said, "I'm not apologizing for warning people." My fiancé said, "Then you won't be at the wedding." My brother looked at him. "You don't get to decide that." I said, "He does. We both do." My mother inhaled sharply. My brother looked genuinely stunned, which would have been funny if it didn't make me want to scream. He really thought my wedding invitation was a birthright. He stood up and said, "Fine. I don't want to go anyway." I said, "Good. Then we agree." The next big explosion happened at my youngest sister's birthday. Because of course it did. Why have a private conversation when you can ruin cake? We were at my middle sister's house. Nothing fancy, just homemade food and balloons my nephew kept attacking with a wooden spoon. My mother had been cold to me all afternoon, which honestly was peaceful compared to her warm manipulation. My father avoided eye contact like I was a bill he couldn't pay. After my youngest sister blew out her candles, my mother said very loudly, "So is your brother still banned from the wedding?" The room died. My youngest sister said, "Mom." My mother looked at her. "What? It's a fair question." I said, "Not today." She said, "It affects the family." I said, "It's her birthday." My mother waved that away. Actually waved it away. Like my sister's birthday was a napkin. "Your brother is devastated." My youngest sister put her fork down. "I'm devastated that you're doing this at my party." My mother's face flushed. "Don't start." My youngest sister said, "No, you don't start. For once, it's my birthday and you're still making him the center of it." My mother started crying again. She said we were cruel. She said we'd always ganged up on him. She said I had been difficult since childhood. She said I never forgave anything. I said, "You mean I remember things?" She said, "You remember them wrong." My middle sister ended the conversation by taking my mother into the kitchen. My father followed because he enjoys arriving after the fire has eaten the house. My youngest sister apologized to me at her own birthday party, which made me feel awful. A few days later, my mother came to my apartment alone. She didn't call first. She just knocked while I was in leggings, an old sweatshirt, and the emotional state of a damp towel. She walked in and sat at my kitchen table like she owned the lease. She said, "I need you to listen without interrupting." I said, "That's already funny." She ignored that. She said I was destroying the family. She said my brother had suffered so much. She said he felt replaced. She said men handle heartbreak differently. She said I'd always been hard on him, always jealous of him, always competing with him. I looked around my apartment with the mismatched chairs, the peeling windowsill, the stack of bills held down by a mug, and I said, "You think I was jealous of the person who got everything?" She said he didn't get everything, he got attention because he needed it. I said I needed parents. Then she did what she always did. She turned the knife into a tissue. She cried. She said she was a bad mother. Maybe everyone would be happier without her. Maybe she should just stay away from the wedding too if I hated her so much. But something different happened too. I saw the pattern while it was happening. Not later. Not in the shower 3 hours after the perfect comeback expired. Right there at the table. I said, "If he isn't invited, and you choose not to come because of that, that's your choice." She stopped crying for half a second. The mask slipped. "You'd really get married without your mother?" I said, "You'd really miss your daughter's wedding to defend your son's tantrum?" She stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor. "You are cold," I said. "No, I'm tired." Then the social pressure started. My mother began calling relatives. Not to explain, to recruit. There's a difference. She told people I'd banned my brother because I was jealous. She said my fiancé had turned me. She said I was punishing her for being a mother. A couple of aunts canceled their wedding RSVPs with polite little messages that smelled like judgment. A cousin sent me a paragraph about forgiveness, which is always easy to recommend when you're not the one paying for it. Another cousin posted something vague on a social media app about people who choose romance over blood. But the pressure worked in little ways. Not in changing my mind, but in making me feel dirty. Like every wedding decision had family fingerprints on it. The guest list, the seating, the music, even the dress. I started imagining my mother's empty chair. Then my brother's smug face if he got invited. Then my fiancé's humiliation at the dinner. Then my mother crying. Then my own graduation with 2 parents absent because my brother was bored. One night, while we were doing dishes, my fiancé stopped scrubbing a pan and said, "Would your life be easier if I wasn't in it?" I turned off the faucet. "Don't say that." He looked ashamed. "I just mean, all this started because of me." I said, "No. All this started before you learned to tie your shoes." He leaned against the counter. "They hate me. They don't know you," I said. "They hate that I'm not alone anymore." We started talking about shrinking the wedding. Not eloping exactly, but cutting it down to people who could sit through a ceremony without reenacting generational dysfunction. My fiancé's sister offered her lake house for a small ceremony if we wanted. At first I said no because I didn't want my mother to win. Then I realized keeping a bigger wedding just to prove she hadn't ruined it was still letting her hold the steering wheel. Then my mother came to our apartment while she thought I was at work. I had taken the morning off because I felt sick and exhausted. My fiancé was also home because a job got rescheduled. We were sitting on the couch, him with coffee, me wrapped in a blanket feeling sorry for myself when someone knocked. He looked through the peephole and his entire face changed. I whispered, "Who is it?" He said, "Your mother." He opened the door halfway. "Now isn't a good time." She smiled past him. "I need to speak with you." I stood up behind him, "Then speak with both of us." Her smile tightened. "This is between me and him." I said, "Nothing about our wedding is between you and him without me." She stepped inside anyway. Not violently. Just with that mother confidence, like the rules of walls didn't apply to her. She said she wanted to talk sense into him. She said he needed to stop isolating me. She said he was controlling me, which was rich coming from a woman who once redistributed my babysitting money because my brother wanted snacks. My fiancé stayed calm. Too calm. He said, "I'm not discussing Maribel with you like she isn't standing here." She turned on him. "You have no idea what you walked into." He said, "I'm starting to." That did it. She accused him of destroying her family. She said he enjoyed turning daughters against mothers. She said he had always wanted my brother's life. That one was so absurd I actually said, "What does that even mean?" She ignored me. Her voice got louder. My neighbors probably heard. My fiancé walked toward the door and said, "You need to leave." She grabbed his arm. Not a gentle touch. A grip. Fingers digging into his sleeve. He tried to pull away and she shoved him back against the wall hard enough that his shoulder hit with a dull sound I still remember. For 1 second the apartment went silent. Then I moved. I got between them, pushed her hands away, and said, "Get out." She said, "He shoved me." I said, "No, he didn't. I saw you." She started yelling that we were treating her like a criminal, that she was a mother, that she had rights. I opened the door and told her to leave before I called the police. My voice was shaking, but I meant it. She left screaming down the hallway. My fiancé stood there holding his shoulder, pale and embarrassed. Embarrassed. That broke me. He looked like he felt guilty for being hurt. I said, "We're documenting this." He said, "It's not that bad." I said, "That sentence is banned in this house." My mother called 23 times that afternoon. Okay, not 23. I'm exaggerating, but it felt like 1,000. She texted, then used my father's phone, then had my brother call. We didn't answer. I took photos of my fiancé's shoulder where redness had started to bloom. He didn't want me to at first. Not because he wanted to protect her, but because he hated being involved in evidence. That's a different thing, and I understood it. But I took the photos anyway. The next day, we went to the police station and filed a report. Nothing dramatic happened. No one gasped. No one said, "Ma'am, we'll take it from here," like a show. The officer listened, typed, asked questions, looked at the photos, and told us to keep records of any future contact. He said if she came back or threatened us, we should call. Very normal. Very boring. Very real. I said quietly, "Don't minimize this for me." I said, "Please. Everyone has minimized everything from my whole life. Don't help them." A few days later, my mother showed up at my workplace parking lot. I was leaving with 2 coworkers, holding my lunch bag and thinking about whether I had the emotional energy to cook dinner or if crackers counted as a meal. She stepped out from between parked cars like a guilt demon. "Maribel," she said. My whole body went cold. My coworkers slowed down. I told them it was fine because apparently I was still committed to lying for ambiance. My mother came closer and demanded that I withdraw the report. She said I was ruining her life. She said my fiancé was making me do it. She said my brother hadn't slept. She said my father was devastated. She said everything except, "I'm sorry I put my hands on him." I said, "You need to leave." She grabbed my elbow. I pulled back. She pushed me once, not hard enough to knock me down, but enough that my coworkers gasped. Then she pushed me again when I tried to walk around her. Security came over. One guard asked if I was okay. My mother started performing immediately. "I'm her mother," she said, as if mothers can't be trespassers. My supervisor came outside because of course this humiliation needed a full audience. She was a practical woman with the emotional softness of a clipboard. And I mean that as a compliment. She asked me directly, "Do you want her removed from the property?" My mouth opened and nothing came out. My mother stared at me with wet eyes, daring me to choose myself in public. I said, "Yes." Security escorted her away. She yelled that I'd regret this. One coworker hugged me. I wanted to disappear into the asphalt. Inside, my supervisor took me into her office. She didn't pry. She said, "Give security her photo. If she comes back, they don't let her in. Also, document this with human resources." So I did. I added that incident to the folder with everything else. The police report, the photos, the messages, the fake accounts. I wasn't building revenge. I was building proof, because my family had taught me that if I didn't document reality, they would rewrite it for me. That night, my fiancé and I sat at the kitchen table. Same table where my mother had cried. Same table where I had tried to be reasonable. I was done with reasonable. I said, "No more." He said, "No more." We called my parents together. I put the phone on speaker because I didn't want to be alone in the old trap. My mother answered with this shaky voice like she was the injured party. I said, "We're cutting contact. You're removed from the wedding. You're not welcome at our home, my work, or anywhere we are. Don't contact us." She started crying immediately. She said she couldn't believe I'd do this. She said she regretted having a daughter who could treat her like trash. She said my fiancé had poisoned me. My father came on the line. "Maribel, try to understand your mother's point of view." And there he was, right on time, asking me to understand the person who had shoved my fiancé and ambushed me at work. I said, "Dad, you have asked me to understand everyone but myself my whole life." He sighed. "That's not fair." I said, "No. What's not fair is you watching this family break the same daughter over and over and calling your silence peace." My mother sobbed louder. My father said, "We're family." I said, "Then you should have acted like it before I had to protect myself from you." My voice didn't sound strong. It sounded shaky and ugly and too loud, but it was mine. My mother said, "If you hang up, don't come crawling back." I said, "I won't." Then I hung up and blocked them. Afterward, I trembled so hard my teeth clicked. My fiancé wrapped a blanket around me. I told him I felt cruel. He said, "Cruel people don't shake after setting boundaries. They sleep fine." We cut the wedding down to a tiny ceremony at his sister's lake house. My sisters came. My aunt and uncle came. His family came. A few friends came. Nobody who had sent me forgiveness essays got an invitation. Shocking how peaceful planning becomes when you remove people who treat your life like a community project. Then I found out I was pregnant. I took the test before work because I am an idiot who likes to destabilize herself before answering emails. It turned positive so fast I thought the test was being sarcastic. I sat on the bathroom floor in my work pants, staring at it, whispering, "Oh my God," like I'd discovered a raccoon in the toilet. My fiancé knocked. "You okay?" I opened the door and handed him the test. He looked at it, looked at me, looked back at it. Then he cried. Not cute single tear crying, full face crumple. I laughed and cried too, and for about 30 seconds everything was pure joy. Then fear arrived with a clipboard. What if my mother found out? What if she tried to come back through the baby? What if I became like her without noticing? What if love turns into control when you're tired and scared? What if I had learned more from that house than I wanted to admit? My fiancé held my face and said, "We're not them." I said, "You don't know that." He said, "No, but we can choose differently every day." We didn't announce the pregnancy widely. We told my sisters. My middle sister cried again because obviously. My youngest sister said, "This baby is about to have the most protective aunt committee in history." My aunt squeezed my hand and told me I didn't owe anyone access to my child just because they shared blood. On the wedding day, the lake was calm, the weather was normal, and nothing caught fire emotionally or otherwise. I wore a simple dress. My fiancé wore the same suit he'd bought for the original wedding, because we were not wasting money just because my family had lost their minds. My nephew carried the rings and dropped them in the grass, causing a 5-minute search that was honestly the most stressful part of the day. Later, while everyone was taking pictures by the lake, my middle sister pulled me aside and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry," she said. I frowned. "For what?" She shook her head. "For asking you to come back. I thought I was giving my son a bigger family. I think I sent you back into the same house you escaped. My father didn't come. My mother didn't come. My brother didn't come. Their absence hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. There were empty spaces in the day. Not chairs exactly, because we had stopped setting them up for people who only came to take, but spaces in my chest where the fantasy version of them should have been. Still, I walked down the little path toward my fiancé, and he looked at me like I was not difficult to love. That's the best way I can describe it. Not like I was perfect, not like I was rescued, just like loving me was something he had chosen and would keep choosing, even when my family came with paperwork. A few weeks after the wedding, my mother started creating fake profiles on a social media app. At first, I didn't know it was her. The messages came from a blank account. "A mother has rights. You'll regret keeping your child away. Your husband won't always be there." Very normal, very cozy bedtime reading. Then one message mentioned something only my mother would phrase that way. She wrote, "You've always punished me for loving your brother differently." Differently. That word, like favoritism, was just a decorating choice. I blocked the profile. Another one appeared. Blocked that too. Then she posted publicly on her own page, talking about daughters who abandon mothers, grandchildren kept away by pride, weddings where mothers are erased. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. People knew. Relatives started sending careful little messages. "What happened? Your mom seems heartbroken. Maybe pregnancy hormones are making this feel bigger?" That last one almost made me throw my phone into a wall. Pregnancy hormones did not shove my husband. Pregnancy hormones did not ambush me at work. Pregnancy hormones did not make a grown man give a presentation about his ex-girlfriend over pasta. My sisters got pressure too. My mother called them crying, asking for updates, asking about my appointments, asking if the baby was a boy or girl. My middle sister refused. My youngest sister blocked her after one call where my mother suggested she was choosing sides. My father remained silent. Not one message, not one apology, not one, "Your mother is out of line." Silence can be a language. His said, "I will not save you from the woman I chose." I started keeping screenshots in a folder. Every message, every post, every fake account. It felt paranoid until my aunt said, "Documentation is not paranoia when someone keeps crossing lines." He started therapy first. He said the situation had gotten under his skin more than he wanted to admit. He felt guilty for being the trigger. He felt angry that he'd been humiliated. He felt protective of me, but also afraid of becoming controlling because everyone kept accusing him of it. Hearing that hurt. My family had managed to make even his care feel suspicious to him. Then, near the end of my pregnancy, my brother messaged me. I stared at his name on my phone like it was a spider. I hadn't blocked him after the wedding because he hadn't contacted me, and maybe some part of me wanted to see if silence would ever turn into accountability. Dangerous hobby. Hope. His message started badly. Of course it did. He said he wasn't trying to start drama. People who say that are usually carrying drama in both hands. He said he knew I hated him. He said he knew my husband hated him. He said he wasn't asking for forgiveness. I almost deleted it. Then I kept reading. He admitted he had arranged the photos and screenshots to make the situation look worse. He said he knew his ex had ended things with him because he'd been controlling. He said he knew my husband hadn't pursued her after, hadn't used me, hadn't done what he accused him of doing. He said he had been embarrassed and angry and couldn't stand that she moved on while he was still stuck. He said when he saw my husband with me, it felt like proof that everyone was laughing at him, even though he knew that wasn't rational. Then he wrote, "Mom knows some of this, but she likes the version where you hurt me because it lets her stay mad at you." I read that line about 10 times. He said he was sending the truth to the family group because our mother was using my baby as another weapon. And even he could see it had gone too far. Even he. Imagine the bar being so low that the spoiled son had to look around and say, "Actually, this is excessive." A few minutes later, screenshots started coming in from my sisters. He had posted in the family group. Not perfectly, not heroically. It was messy and defensive and late. He still made himself sound sadder than accountable. But he admitted the core truth. The dinner presentation was manipulated. The ex had left him, and I hadn't stolen anything from him. The group went weirdly quiet. One aunt wrote, "I didn't know this." A cousin deleted her vague post. Another relative sent me a private message saying, "I'm sorry if I judged too quickly," which is apology adjacent, like a diet apology, but fine. My mother responded in the group by saying my brother was confused and being manipulated by me. By me, the woman who hadn't spoken to him. My father said nothing. I expected to feel victorious. I didn't. I felt tired. Angry, yes, but tired in my bones. Because the truth came out, and it still didn't give me back my engagement dinner, my wedding plans, my peace at work, or the version of my mother I kept trying to invent. I texted my brother privately. I wrote, "Thank you for telling the truth. I'm not ready for more than that." He responded, "I know." My son was born on a rainy morning after a labor that made me understand why people in old stories saw visions. I will not romanticize it. I screamed. I cursed. I told my husband at one point that his breathing was annoying, which was unfair because he was just existing, but I was busy trying to become two people. He cried when our son arrived. I cried. The baby cried. Very dramatic room. Very loud reviews from everyone. Holding him was strange. Beautiful, yes, but also terrifying. He was so small and warm, and I kept thinking, how does anyone look at a child and decide their job is to make that child earn love? The first days home were a blur of feedings, laundry, naps that lasted 17 minutes, and me crying because his tiny socks kept disappearing. My husband moved around the apartment like a sleepy ghost, making coffee he forgot to drink. My sisters came with food and did dishes without asking where things belonged. My aunt visited and held the baby while I showered, which felt like a luxury spa experience, even though I used the same cheap soap as always. No one from my parents' house came. A week after we came home, a message arrived from an unknown number. I knew before opening it. My stomach knew. It was my mother. She wrote that one day my son would ask why he grew up without his grandmother, and I would have to tell him I chose pride over family. She wrote that babies need grandparents. She wrote that she hoped I could live with the guilt. She wrote, "You always wanted to punish me, and now you're using your child to do it." I read it while my son slept on my chest, making tiny noises like a squeaky door. My husband was in the kitchen washing bottles. For a second, rage rose so fast I saw white. I wanted to respond. I wanted to send every screenshot, every memory, every bill I paid alone, every graduation photo without her in it, every piece of me she had tried to make responsible for her favorite son's feelings. Instead, I took a screenshot and saved it to the folder. Then I blocked the number. My son shifted against me. His little fist opened and closed on my shirt. I looked at him and thought about the laundry basket, the graduation, the money, the dinner presentation, my mother's hand on my wrist telling me to let my brother finish humiliating my husband. I thought about all the times love in my family had come with a receipt attached. "You owe me because I fed you. You owe him because he hurts. You owe silence because noise makes us look bad. I whispered, "Not here." My husband came back and saw my face. Was it her? I nodded. He didn't ask what she said. He just sat beside me. I said, "I'm scared I'll mess him up." He said, "We probably will. A little. Everyone does." I glared at him, comforting. He smiled tiredly. "But we'll apologize. We'll listen. We won't make him responsible for our feelings." I don't have a perfect ending. My mother didn't become accountable. My father didn't suddenly grow courage. My brother told the truth too late and still has work to do that is not my job to supervise. Some relatives still think I'm harsh. Some probably always will. Let them. I'm done auditioning for people who only clap when I bleed quietly. My life now is boring in the best way. Rent, diapers, work emails, grocery lists, my husband asking where we keep batteries even though we have lived together long enough for him to know, my sisters sending ridiculous baby photos with captions like they're running his public relations team. I still get angry at random times. I still cry in the car sometimes. I still hear my mother's voice in my head when I set a boundary, calling me cold. But then I look at my son, and I remember I'm not cold. I'm the wall between him and a fire that burned me for years. And maybe that's what my mother never understood. Love isn't letting someone hurt you forever because they gave birth to you. Love isn't handing one child all the softness and telling the others to stop complaining about the bruises. Love isn't a family group chat full of people asking for forgiveness before they ask what happened. Love is what my sisters did when they showed up with casseroles and no questions. Love is what my husband did when he let me shake after the hardest call of my life and didn't try to talk over me. Love is what I do every time I let my son cry without making his feelings someone else's punishment. So no, my mother doesn't know him. Maybe one day he'll ask. I'll tell him the truth in a way a child can hold. Not the full ugly version, not until he's old enough. I'll tell him some people love with strings, and some homes have rules that hurt people. And my job was to keep him safe. But I won't unlock the door just because someone outside is crying. Not this time.